Welcome to Cultural Entropy. This is going to be a book review for the 1984 novel by William Gibson, Neuromancer. Um, Probably one of the best novels I've ever read. With the big caveat, if you're not a fan of hard sci-fi, I would probably stay away from it. I was trying to describe this to someone who's not into this type of book, and I just broke down and said, like, The Matrix and Blade Runner, it's that. Um, Quick summary would be there is a criminal, low-level criminal by the name of Case, who used to be a console cowboy, someone that plugs into the Matrix and hacks things. He is recruited to get back in the game by a shadowy individual with unknown motivations, and then it becomes like just your general heist novel, but with that facade of the Matrix and the Blade Runner cyberpunk genre. Again, like I said, like one of the best books I've ever written or read. I would read this again in the future. I'm not one of those people that likes to reread novels. They are investments, and unless they really have something to give back, once I read one once, I probably will not be returning to it. In this case, yeah, I would read it again. That is not to say that this novel is without its criticisms, especially in the mechanical department. So before I get into the spoiler section, I would generally say, like, yeah, if you have problems with stories that just go and instead of but or therefore, the South Park stuff, um, I would not recommend this novel. It is also not a novel that will hold your hand in any way, shape, or form. I am not a big fan of very drippy prose, and this is me coming off of Mystic River. Yeah, if you can't put that world into your head easily, William Gibson does not slow down. He does not necessarily paint you a picture. He gives you what you need, and you keep going. And again, like if you aren't already into kind of some of this stuff ahead of time from a real world perspective or from a hard sci-fi perspective, he's probably not going to spend the time explaining it to you too much. It's the copy that I had is 271 pages, and it probably should have been double that size. With the caveat of the mechanical problems would have definitely been a bigger problem if he would have had a longer series. So I have two reading gears. Like, this is boring. I want to get it done. And I'm slow and methodical, and it takes me forever. I did get this done in like 2 days, reading it very slowly. I had to reread certain sections. There was one section involving the recruitment of one of the characters for the heist that I had to reread like 2 or 3 times, and I still don't exactly know what took place in that chapter. Again, so as a warning to certain people, like you better be into this stuff, or you're probably not going to have the same experience that I did. All right, spoiler section. This is where I definitely talk about like the mechanics, and that means like if you haven't read it, um, I highly suggest that you go read it. If you have read it, then you'll be a little bit more on the joke when I talk about this stuff. So the first act, when Case is in Chiba City, I had a problem with the status quo of the character when it comes to like his love interest Linda Lee and the recruitment by Molly Millions and Armitage, the shadowy individual. Um, Again, like I like cause and effect coming off of the status quo. These two things kind of meet together in a way that there may have been some conversation about the AI, being involved. So I don't want to say that that wasn't taking place, but at a certain point, like the death of Molly Millions, or not Molly Millions, of Linda Lee being, um, you know, Deus Ex Machina, um, the author injecting himself into the story. It just so happens that they were in the right place at the right time. I didn't necessarily like that, and there were a few other things that, like, from the status quo meeting the inciting incident, I don't like mechanically. It didn't really hurt the story because of how fast the action skips along. But again, like a knock that I think that it could have been a little bit more descriptive with the prose overall. That's not to say again that I didn't think it was like one of the best novels I've ever read. Um, there are some other things as the second act goes into the third act where it does appear to be a series of ands, and I don't necessarily have that big a problem with this because the characters from a POV perspective are in the dark. It doesn't necessarily mean that I do think that like Case is a properly fleshed out character. Again, I don't think that any of this is necessarily bad. I just, it's a 271 page novel. I could have definitely gone for 500, and I would have probably liked it a little bit better, but that would have meant cleaning up the mechanics. And then, generally speaking, being confused at some of the things that are going on, like the Rastafarian at the end. I think Malcolm was his name. Kind of understanding like what was going on with some of these characters, because again, it just clips by so fast. Um, Not taking the time to develop certain things in its entirety, like understanding why Peter Riviera, like what his role and what he was up to. Like some of the stuff was a little confusing. Like I said, I read things over multiple times. But it's generally like it did make me set the book down and think a few times. I did really like the novel. I would recommend it to people that are into sci-fi. If you haven't already read it, it's not a novel that I was overwhelmingly aware of until I got back into my reading kick. So I could definitely see that, like, to your mainstream audiences, it would not be something that they would be aware of, and I definitely know why after reading it. So again, like, it would be just a limited recommendation to certain people outside of that. But anyway, that's about all I got, and currently reading the first book of the Dresden Files, Stormfront.